Buried beneath Kensington Palace lies a vault no royal tour will ever show you. Thick steel doors, retina-scanned entry, and no press allowed. This is where Catherine, Princess of Wales, keeps her most forbidden legacy. The heirlooms she's never worn, never discussed, and may never reveal. Why? Because some jewels don't sparkle. They whisper secrets. The public sees the polished version. Tiaras carefully selected for state banquets, brooches pinned with diplomatic precision, and earrings that seem to echo the grace of past queens. But beneath the palace walls, hidden far below the manicured gardens and hushed drawing rooms, there is another world. One that even seasoned royal aides hesitate to speak about. A space encased in reinforced concrete, sealed behind a biometric lock system known only to 3 living people, and Catherine is one of them. This is not the royal collection you have seen displayed behind bulletproof glass in the Tower of London. This is something far more selective and far more dangerous. A collection of heirlooms shrouded in centuries of silence, betrayal, and quiet rebellion. Jewels that were passed hand to hand in whispered transactions. Gifts never officially acknowledged. Pieces with inscriptions that have been deliberately filed off. These are not family treasures. They are royal ghosts. Why are they hidden? Not because of their value. In fact, some are believed to be among the most expensive items ever acquired by the monarchy. A Colombian emerald necklace thought to have been exchanged during a Cold War treaty negotiation. A carved sapphire pendant once belonging to a queen, who was later declared mad and erased from the records. A tiara so heavy with Burmese rubies, it has its own travel chest. Each piece carries weight, not just in carats, but in consequence. There is an unspoken rule within the royal household: some items must remain unseen. Never worn, never photographed. To do so would invite questions, provoke old wounds, or, worse, shine a light on histories the crown has spent decades burying. These heirlooms are locked away not because they're forgotten, but because they are remembered too clearly by the wrong people. They symbolize moments of defiance, of controversy, of shame, and now they belong to Catherine. But with that inheritance comes burden. She is not merely the future queen consort, she is the keeper of a vault of truths that must not be told. Her role demands grace, diplomacy, and tradition. But beneath that calm exterior is a woman grappling with a legacy that contradicts the very image she's been groomed to uphold. She knows that one wrong jewel, worn at the wrong time, could reignite scandals buried long ago. And yet, she cannot part with them. She is both custodian and prisoner. There is one piece in particular that royal insiders whisper about. A diamond choker wrapped in black velvet, too politically toxic to ever be worn again. It hasn't been seen since the 1960s, when it sparked a diplomatic standoff so severe it nearly ended a royal alliance. No one dares touch it now. And still, it remains in that vault, untouched, but never forgotten. But to understand why these pieces remain in the dark, we must go back, decades back, to the woman who first sealed their fate. When Diana's safe was opened after her death, not everything was accounted for. A select few items, marked with her initials, wrapped in handwritten notes, were removed quietly. These weren't for display. They were for protection, for the one woman she suspected would need them most, the future wife of her firstborn. Diana knew the power of jewels better than anyone. To the outside world, they were ornaments, gleaming symbols of monarchy. But to Diana, they were messages, silent statements in stone. A tiara chosen for diplomacy, earrings worn out of spite, a bracelet that whispered resistance. Every piece she wore, especially after her separation from Charles, became part of her silent rebellion, a language only those paying close attention could understand. She wore her pain in diamonds, her defiance in emeralds, her heartbreak in pearls. And behind palace walls, that language was feared more than spoken words. As her final years grew more turbulent, Diana made decisions that unsettled the royal establishment. Among them, selecting specific heirlooms to be set aside, unofficially, unrecorded, undocumented, for a woman who didn't yet exist. She didn't know her name, she didn't know her face, but she knew one thing: whoever married William would need armor. Real, symbolic, and secret. Jewelry that wouldn't just dazzle but defend. Royal staff, those closest to the late princess, remember the unease that followed. The morning after her death, an unofficial inventory was taken of her possessions. But there were anomalies. Several pieces noted in older photographs or private logs simply weren't there. Others had been placed in nondescript boxes, labeled only with initials, CM or for her. No chain of custody, no explanation. When questioned, one longtime aide simply said, "She was very clear about her wishes. Not all of them were written." It's believed that these shadow heirlooms, as they came to be known in royal whisper networks, never passed through official hands. Instead, they were protected by a private trustee, a person never publicly identified, who later arranged for them to reach Catherine during the earliest days of her engagement, before the public knew, before the ring was even announced. It wasn't a formal presentation. It was a quiet moment in a locked room, far from cameras, far from fanfare, and it shattered her. Among the pieces was a necklace unlike anything else in the royal vaults. Not because of its stones, though they were rare, almost unsettling in their intensity, but because of what it meant. The design was bold, heavy, nothing like Diana's usual taste. Tucked inside its box was a note, in Diana's unmistakable handwriting, "For the day they try to silence you." Those 7 words, more than the diamonds themselves, carried the weight of history. A warning, a blessing, a dare. Catherine has never worn it. Not even in private, sources say, but she keeps it close, as both shield and shadow. It is not part of the official royal collection. It is not catalogued, not insured, not acknowledged in any palace records, but it exists, and its presence speaks to a tension few outside the royal circle ever truly grasp: the push and pull between what is inherited and what is imposed. But it wasn't only Diana's wishes that shaped the secrecy. It was Elizabeth's silent judgment. Before her passing, Queen Elizabeth summoned Catherine for a private audience. What was said remains unrecorded, but insiders speak of a warning. Some heirlooms, the Queen reportedly said, were never to be revived. 1 tiara, 2 brooches, and 1 ring, all tied to betrayals, abdications, and blood feuds. It was a meeting shrouded in silence. No staff present, no official record, no trace of its agenda. But whispers followed, as they always do when the crown shifts weight behind closed doors. Those who caught glimpses of Catherine afterward described her as changed. Composed? Yes, but quieter. Something behind her eyes, like someone who had just been handed keys to a door they never intended to open. The Queen, frail but still formidable, had passed down not just a legacy, but a warning. And it came wrapped not in protocol, but in shadows. For centuries, the monarchy has used jewels as tools of statecraft, adornments that speak louder than policy. But buried within the collection are pieces that the firm doesn't acknowledge, objects that carry not celebration, but shame. Royal historians have long speculated about the so-called untouchables, jewels steeped in scandal, so radioactive that even Elizabeth herself refused to wear them. Pieces that don't feature in exhibitions, that no royal woman has touched in generations. Not because they were lost, but because they were locked away with intention. One of them, the tiara in question, is believed to have belonged to Wallace Simpson. Yes, that Wallace, the woman for whom a king gave up his throne. The tiara, custom-made in the 1930s, was whispered to be a gift from Edward VIII during their exile. A piece never worn within British borders, never acknowledged by the palace. And yet, somehow, it made its way back into royal hands. How and by whom remains a secret. But its presence in the vault is a source of deep discomfort, because wearing it would not just be a fashion choice, it would be a statement. One the monarchy cannot afford to make. Then there are the brooches, both tied to long-forgotten feuds within the family. One allegedly gifted by an Italian prince with fascist ties, the other rumored to have been passed between sisters during a bitter inheritance dispute. And finally, the ring, the most chilling of them all, said to have belonged to a foreign duchess who died under suspicious circumstances after marrying into the Windsor line. It's described in notes as iridescent, too dark for diamonds, too light for sapphires, a stone that seems to shimmer with disapproval. No photographs exist, but those who've seen it say it feels cursed. Elizabeth's message was not about style, it was about silence. These were not jewels to be worn, but chapters to be closed. Her Majesty understood the fragility of memory, the way a single brooch could unravel decades of carefully constructed narrative. Her approach was quiet enforcement, exile by omission. These heirlooms would never be publicly disavowed. They would simply cease to exist in the eyes of the world, fashioned into historical amnesia. Catherine understood. She didn't argue. She didn't question. Because she wasn't just being handed forbidden objects, she was being entrusted with the burden of erasure. And still, the irony remained. The jewels she was told never to wear were among the most breathtaking in the vault. Crafted by the finest hands, gleaming with stories untold. They were beauty wrapped in consequence, and for all their brilliance, they would remain in darkness. Yet some of the most dangerous pieces didn't come from queens, but mistresses. They were rumored to have been commissioned in secret by Edward VIII for Wallace Simpson, and kept in a separate case labeled only W.S. Red Rubies, twisted in serpentine gold, unlike anything in the royal vaults. After decades in exile, the set has re-emerged, not in public, but locked away in Kate's private collection. It is a set that no one officially speaks of, yet everyone within the palace knows exists. The story begins in Paris, where Edward and Wallace lived out their post-abdication exile, disgraced, yet defiant. Stripped of his crown but not his fortune, Edward spared no expense when it came to his American duchess. He commissioned a suite of rubies, deep and blood-like, entwined in a coiling design that was said to mirror a serpent, a symbol, perhaps, of temptation, of Eve herself. But the message was unmistakable. This was not just love. It was defiance, dripping in scarlet. After Edward's death, the jewels were presumed sold or lost or buried with Wallace. But they weren't. They had been kept quietly, under lock and key in France. And when the Duchess of Windsor died in 1986, the set was discreetly transferred back to England. Not as a gesture of reconciliation, but as a way of preventing them from becoming a public relic of royal shame. Smuggled in through private channels, they were never declared, never entered into the royal collection. But they exist. And now, incredibly, they belong to Catherine. The decision to give them to her, or more accurately, to make her their keeper, was not made lightly. It was wrapped in hesitation, veiled in politics. Some argued they should be destroyed. Others whispered they should remain hidden in a drawer beneath Sandringham, never spoken of again. But somehow they ended up in Kate's vault. A silent test, a twisted inheritance, and with it came a terrible choice, because to wear them would be to resurrect a ghost. Not just Wallace, but the scandal that nearly broke the monarchy. The abdication crisis is more than a footnote in royal history. It's a scar. And these rubies, they are the blood still seeping from it. Advisors warned Catherine against ever displaying them. Media strategists prepared statements just in case a photo leaked. The optics would be catastrophic, they said. A future queen draped in the jewels of the woman who brought down a king? Unthinkable. And yet, Kate has kept them. She hasn't returned them, hasn't asked for them to be buried deeper. Some say she is fascinated by them, not by their scandal, but by their raw, unfiltered symbolism. They are not royal in the traditional sense. They are tainted, yes, but also intoxicating. They represent power chosen over duty, love chosen over legacy. Everything the monarchy tells her she must never choose. She has never worn them, not even in private. But she has seen them, studied them, touched them. And in moments of solitude, she is said to have stared at them for long stretches of time, as if trying to decipher their meaning. Not just for the past, but for her future. Because Catherine, unlike any royal before her, stands at the intersection of duty and modernity. She is the bridge between obedience and selfhood. And in those rubies, those forbidden stones, are all the questions the crown hopes she never asks. If forbidden jewels carry the weight of scandal, others carry the burden of expectation and pain. She was promised it after the wedding, one of the oldest and most coveted diadems in royal history. But within weeks, the promise was quietly rescinded. Why? Because the Queen Mother had written a clause in her private will. The diadem would only pass to a queen whose lineage was purely British. Catherine was born of the people. It had been whispered about long before Catherine ever walked down the aisle. The emerald diadem, emeralds as large as robin's eggs, set in platinum filigree so delicate it was said to shimmer with every breath, was a symbol of continuity, of sovereign blood. Passed down through reigning queens since the Victorian era, it was more than just an heirloom. It was a crown without a throne. And unofficially, it had been earmarked for Kate the moment her engagement to William was announced. A gesture of inclusion, of legitimacy, or so it seemed. But somewhere, between ceremony and reality, the legacy twisted. The Queen Mother, long gone but never irrelevant, had quietly ensured her voice would echo long after her death. In a clause buried in private paperwork, read only by a select few senior aides and legal custodians, she had made her intentions devastatingly clear. The emerald diadem was not to pass to any woman whose bloodline did not meet the old standard. Purely British, she had written. 3 words. Cold. Final. Immutable. No one told Catherine directly. Not at first. It was William who found out, and it was William who raged. He demanded clarity, intervention, correction. But tradition in the royal family does not shout. It suffocates. Palace courtiers, some older than the marriage itself, pushed back. Her Majesty's wishes, they said, must be honored. The Queen, still reigning at the time, refused to overturn her mother's clause. Not out of malice, perhaps, but out of duty to the past. It was a painful silence, and it said everything. For Catherine, the betrayal wasn't in the diadem, it was in the message. That no matter how dutifully she walked the line, how gracefully she carried the weight, there would always be a glass wall she couldn't shatter. She had married into a crown, but not into its full acceptance. Behind the scenes, it cut deeper than most knew. Her public smile didn't waver, but inside Kensington, she withdrew. Not out of weakness, but quiet resolve. The diadem wasn't refused. It wasn't discarded. It was hidden, wrapped in a silk cloth and locked away. No portrait features it. No occasion calls for it. It has become a relic of rejection. And still, she keeps it. Not to wear, but to remember. Because the emerald diadem is no longer a symbol of what she could be. It is a reminder of what she was told she could never become. And in a monarchy desperate to modernize, the irony is searing. The future queen denied a crown by the past. William, protective to the bone, has never forgiven it. Some say it deepened the divide between him and the inner circle of the firm. Others claim it only steeled his resolve to ensure history does not repeat itself with their children. But Catherine? She moved on without moving past it. The crown she wears now is quieter, made of dignity, not diamonds. But even more haunting than the diadem was the gift that arrived anonymously, and may never be claimed. It arrived without warning. No note, no sender. Just a velvet box delivered to Kensington, addressed only to the Duchess. Inside, a black opal brooch never seen before in royal records, and a scrap of parchment with 5 words. She'll know when to wear it. The package bypassed the usual security channels, delivered not through official couriers, but slipped in with the Morning Post. Anonymous, untraceable. The handwriting on the envelope was old-fashioned, almost Victorian. Some claimed it looked like a replica. Others insisted it was the real thing. But none could deny the brooch inside was like nothing seen before. A black opal, swirling with iridescent colors that shifted with the light, set in what appeared to be ancient gold. It looked older than the monarchy itself. And yet, it bore no royal crest. No hallmark. No name. Catherine's reaction, according to sources close to the palace, was instant and visceral. A wave of fascination followed by something colder. Discomfort, even fear. The opal gleamed like oil, its surface never still, almost alive. She asked if it had been ordered, if it was a misdirected gift from a foreign dignitary, but no explanation came. And that note, she'll know when to wear it. It hung in the air like a dare. Palace security launched an immediate investigation. The package had no fingerprints, no postal mark, no tracking code. It hadn't passed through any formal channel. It was as if it had simply appeared. Some whispered it was tied to Queen Victoria, who, history records, held seances and dabbled in spiritualism in her later years. Others suggested it came from an exiled royal relative, one whose blood ties had long been erased from the family tree. But no one could prove anything, and that made it worse. More disturbing still was what lay inside the brooch itself. After days of silence, someone finally dared to open it. Tucked within its hollow frame, concealed behind a hidden clasp, was a sliver of parchment with a single Latin phrase etched in fading ink. Silentium reginae est ultimum arma. The Queen's silence is her final weapon. It wasn't just strange. It was unnerving, as if the piece had been created not for beauty, but for warning. Catherine never wore it. Not once. It was returned to its box and placed in the vault, separated from the others. According to staff, it remains untouched to this day, stored in isolation, unlisted, unworn, unnamed in official inventories. But its presence lingers, as if waiting. Some believe it's cursed. Others believe it's a message from the past meant for the future. Whatever it is, it now belongs to her. A gift no one can explain, carrying a meaning no one dares interpret. But while some gifts arrive shrouded in mystery, others come with a heavy crown, and no room for refusal. Certain heirlooms come with the title. They are expected to be worn by future queens. But not all traditions can be honored in a modern monarchy, and Catherine knows this. Several pieces, including the infamous Irish blood emeralds, sit in her collection, untouched. Their history is too dark. Their symbolism too dangerous. There are jewels that whisper lineage, and others that scream legacy. And then there are those that bleed, stones that carry the weight of conquest, of pain, of history rewritten in favor of the victor. The so-called Irish blood emeralds fall into the latter. A breathtaking set of deep green stones, their size almost unnatural, their color shockingly vivid. On the surface, they are among the most stunning pieces in the entire collection. But underneath, they're a reminder of everything the crown tries not to speak of. Rumor has it, they were taken during one of the colonial raids in 19th-century Ireland, seized from a noble estate during a time of famine, fire, and fury. Official records are vague, as they always are when the truth is too brutal to document. But oral histories persist, and in Ireland, memory runs deep. These emeralds were meant to impress. Instead, they accuse. When Catherine inherited them, through ceremony, not choice, she was briefed on their significance, not just their beauty, but the baggage. She listened, she read, and then she declined. Quietly, but firmly. The set was offered for several events: state dinners, Commonwealth appearances, even a potential coronation preview. Each time she refused. No announcement, no protest, just absence. Her decision wasn't about fashion, it was about principle. But inside the palace, that distinction meant little. The refusal sparked tension. Behind closed doors, traditionalists pushed back. "They belong to the role," one reportedly said, "not the woman." Advisors reminded her that part of being queen is upholding continuity, carrying the past, no matter how heavy, into the future. But Catherine was unmoved. Her silence was strategic, calculated, a refusal to let herself be used as a billboard for a legacy she never chose. Global observers noticed. Activists applauded. Diplomats raised eyebrows. But within the firm, her restraint was seen by some as rebellion. Not loud, not public, but dangerous. Because refusal, when done by a royal, isn't just a choice, it's a message. One that lingers longer than a speech. Catherine knew exactly what she was doing, and more importantly, what she wasn't willing to do. The cost of that decision is still unfolding. Whispers circulate that some within the family believe she's setting a precedent, drawing invisible lines around parts of history the monarchy prefers to blur. But Catherine is not playing their game. Her silence, once seen as submission, now reads as strategy. She's not breaking rules, she's refusing to be bound by outdated ones. And every unworn piece in that vault is a quiet act of resistance. But Catherine's greatest challenge isn't what's in the vault. It's what might happen if the vault is ever opened. One day, the vault will no longer be private. When Catherine becomes queen, royal tradition dictates that all inherited jewels enter the public trust. But what happens when that collection includes forbidden gifts, scandals, and deeply personal pain? Will she hide them forever, or let the truth sparkle in the light? It's a dilemma unlike any faced by a future queen before her. For centuries, the transition from duchess to consort to queen has followed a largely predictable arc. Alongside the title comes the regalia, and with the regalia, transparency. The royal collection becomes public record, its contents displayed, catalogued, and, at least in theory, accessible to the people. But what happens when what's inherited is not simply ornamental, but dangerous? When it carries the weight of exile, betrayal, politics, and blood? For Catherine, the vault is more than a storeroom. It is a battleground between what must remain hidden and what the world may soon demand to see. Once she is queen, she will no longer have the protective veil of a duchess or a consort. The expectation will be full disclosure. Royal tradition requires that all personal jewelry of historic significance be listed, logged, and, eventually, exhibited. But buried within her collection are pieces too volatile for daylight. Tiaras tied to abdication, brooches wrapped in curses, necklaces that whisper with the ghosts of colonial plunder. If they emerge, they don't just shine, they accuse. Inside palace walls, there is already quiet dread. Senior courtiers have begun preparing contingency statements. Legal teams have drafted explanations for why certain heirlooms may never appear on official inventories. Media advisors brace for the inevitable questions. Where did this piece come from? Why has it never been worn? Who gave it to her? Catherine, they know, will soon have to choose between preservation and revelation, between loyalty to a centuries-old system and the demands of a world that no longer tolerates secrets draped in diamonds. Privately, sources say she struggles. Some nights, she reportedly walks the halls alone, past the locked chamber that holds it all. The weight isn't just ceremonial, it's emotional. Every item in that vault carries a memory, a warning, a burden. Some were given in love, others in silence, and still more were never meant to be found at all. To open that vault is to unravel decades of curated narrative. To resist is to invite suspicion. Either path risks damage to the monarchy, to herself, to the future she's been tasked to represent. William, ever the pragmatist, walks a careful line. He knows what the institution demands, but he also knows the power of authenticity. He has lived through the consequences of secrecy, the slow corrosion of trust. He wants a monarchy that survives, but not at any cost. And that means supporting Catherine, even if her choices challenge tradition, even if they expose the rot beneath the gold. Whispers inside the firm speak of a coming storm, a jewel reckoning, some call it. A moment when silence will no longer be an option, when the past must be confronted with open hands, not clenched fists. And when it comes, all eyes will be on Catherine, not for what she wears, but for what she dares to reveal. But before the coronation, before the reckoning, there's one final secret no one expected her to keep. It was meant to be a gesture of peace. A sapphire choker originally commissioned by Diana, intended for whichever son's wife needed it most. But after the fallout, after the interviews and silence, the choker was withheld. Not lost, not gifted. Just locked away. And only Catherine knows where it is. Diana had always understood the emotional weight of jewelry. For her, pieces weren't just accessories, they were symbols, statements, shields. That choker, gleaming with sapphires darker than midnight, had been designed not for glamour, but for healing. Commissioned in private, away from the public glare, it was intended as a bridge between her son's futures. A simple, powerful wish. That whichever woman entered the storm of royal life and found herself most alone would find strength in something made by hands that knew exactly what isolation felt like. But time, as it often does in the monarchy, turned the gesture into a fracture. After Diana's death, the choker was quietly kept aside, preserved with intention. Both William and Harry were told of its meaning. And when both married, there was quiet discussion among the inner circle about who should receive it. Some argued Catherine, as the first to marry, had the rightful claim. Others said Meghan, coming from outside the aristocratic world, was more in need of its protective symbolism. But then came the rift, the press war, the departures, the interviews, and suddenly the choker was no longer a question of tradition. It was a question of loyalty. Catherine, sources say, was devastated, not just by the growing divide between brothers, but by the weight of the decision now resting on her shoulders. Diana had meant the choker to unify, but if she gave it, it could be seen as betrayal. If she kept it, it would be seen as erasure. There was no version of this story that didn't end in heartbreak. So she did the only thing she could. She hid it. Not discarded. Not destroyed. Simply hidden from the eyes of the world. And, more importantly, from the institution that would demand to control the narrative around it. Some insiders claim it was placed in the deepest part of her private vault. Others believe it's been moved off-site, held in trust until a time when the royal family can truly reconcile. But wherever it lies, one thing is certain. Meghan never received it. And yes, she knows. There are whispers that she asked, not directly, but through intermediaries, that when her second child was born, there was hope of a small symbolic gesture, a sign of goodwill. But no message came, no box, no sapphire, only silence. And that silence, more than any headline, deepened the wound. To this day, the choker remains unseen. Its existence is not denied, but it is never acknowledged. Some say Catherine still intends to give it, one day, when the time is right. Others believe the moment has already passed, that the fracture is now too wide, that the symbolism has curdled into memory. But even now, the question lingers. What if? What if she wears it in 20 years, handing it to Charlotte, telling her what it could have meant? What if, in some quiet moment, it reappears, bridging what was once broken? Or what if it never surfaces again, buried beneath layers of duty, discretion, and regret? In the kingdom of crowns and whispers, not all power is worn. Some of it waits, unseen, unspoken, shimmering in silence, until the day she chooses to reveal it.